And over the course of the next 75 minutes, you will have the opportunity to hear some stories and to tell some of your own stories. Through the use of parables, Jesus got to explain really complex and difficult issues in the context of the people he was speaking to. That's the beauty of telling stories. In those days, they called them parables, but those stories are so beautifully crafted that they still evoke all kinds of emotions today that make us think with our hearts and minds while others push us into action. Moreover, many of Jesus' lessons teach us what it means to be together on the road towards becoming beloved community. We are blessed beyond measure to be able to draw so many messages from the common theme of loving your neighbor as yourself. So I would like to begin by telling you a story tonight about my family. This is a story about my dad and his older brother. My father and his siblings grew up in a rural Alabama town. My dad was born in 1921, just to give some context for the time in which he would have lived there. He was the third of 13 children, although 2 died in childbirth. I would later come to understand that his father was a sharecropper. I knew they worked in the fields, specifically picking cotton. I was often told stories about my dad picking cotton before he went to school. But then he also claimed he walked miles each day to school, and in typical fashion, my siblings and I would chuckle and roll our eyes and go, "Sure, Dad, sure, you walked 10 miles to school." He would tell us that we should be so grateful that our school was only a few blocks from the house while he slugged through the snow to get the opportunity to attend school. He grew up in the Church of Christ, vastly different from the Episcopal church that my mom was baptized into. People used to refer to their union as a mixed marriage. Their denomination differences became an issue with the addition of children. I'm number 2 of 7 kids. My older brother was baptized and given godparents at 6 weeks old. I saw photos of him in his baptismal gown. But just 15 months later, when I came along, my dad had decided that no one else would be baptized at infancy, but rather he wanted to wait until we were old enough to declare which denomination we wanted to belong to. The only exception was child number 5, my youngest brother, who was baptized shortly after being born for fear that he was not going to survive. He was a twin, and after my mother had been in labor for about 25 hours, someone decided to take her for x-rays to see what was going on. Now you can tell this was a long time ago. It was discovered that there were 2 premature babies trying to come through the birth canal together. I'm happy to report that my brother survived and is still alive and well. My mother preceded my father in death, and after she died, my dad began to cry over little things. I would say that I rarely, if ever, saw him shed tears before her death, but after that, everything shifted. Ultimately, the 7 of us were baptized and confirmed in our home Episcopal church. So imagine our surprise when in 1982, my dad was confirmed one Sunday morning at the Church of the Incarnation. We were thrilled. Now, as an adult, I used to stop by his house most afternoons after work just to check on him. And one day, he was sitting on the side of his bed, awash in tears. He had just gotten off the phone with his older brother, Otis, and they were both very emotional. The day before, on a Sunday, Otis's wife had awakened him super early and asked him to go to church with her. He went occasionally while she was a regular worshiper. He initially said no, he didn't feel like it. For some reason, she insisted on this day that he go with her. So he got up, dressed, and off they went to their Church of Christ in Apple Valley, California. Near the end of the service, the pastor asked if anyone wanted to give a testimony, which is their custom. It happened on occasion, and this particular Sunday would be no exception. Suddenly, an elderly white man rose and asked to come forward. When he reached the front, he said, "I want to say something. I'm an old man now, and I don't know how much more time I have to live. He said he needed to repent and free his conscience from something that had happened many years ago. He went on to say that he used to be a school bus driver in Lamar County, Alabama. And he would go through this region every morning and pick up white boys and white girls and take them to school. Most mornings, he would see two black boys walking to school, and he knew they had a long way to go. He would see them with their obviously hand-me-down shoes and poor coats in the winter. He would zoom past them every day, rain or shine. But sometimes when the weather was awful, he would feel bad to see them on that red clay road. But there was no way he could pick them up. He could never give them a ride. That would cost him his job, and besides, it was against the law. But he wished he could meet them and tell them how sorry he was. He had never been able to forget them. After a minute, my Uncle Otis stood, and beginning to weep, he said, "Sir, one of those little boys was me, and the other was my brother Kenneth, who was my father." The man apologized and asked for his forgiveness. My uncle firmly believed that God had sent him to church that morning, specifically for this testimony, and so he accepted his apology. Now, why did I choose this story to tell? Because as difficult as it is for me to recount that awful time in the life of my father and his sibling, every time I think of it, I gain new perspective. I stopped laughing about the brothers who had regaled their traveling stories, those children who trudged along the Alabama highways, rain or shine. And now they had my profound respect. Hearing the story from the viewpoint of the bus driver tells me that the world is not black and white, and that everyone who passes you by does not necessarily mean you harm, even when they hurt you. It is possible that all of the men could have died holding on to anger and sadness over unresolved events that were over 60 years old. Imagine what went through the heads of two elementary school boys whose fathers sent them to school every day, telling them that education was their ticket out of the cotton fields, watching other kids ride to school. While I am happy I know this story, I wish I had captured this in the voices of those directly impacted. I am sorry that I have no recordings of my dad or my uncle or the bus driver, for that matter. Storytelling is so important. It is how knowledge moves from one generation to another. It is how we learn about each other. We have to listen to each other's stories if we're ever going to understand the other. There is an African proverb that says, "Until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter." If the bus driver had never said his piece in the Church of Christ on that particular Sunday morning, there would always be a question about a driver who maliciously passed little black boys on the side of a road without even thinking and drove right past them. 2 years ago, I advocated to capture stories from parishioners from every black church in this diocese. Statistics are easy to come by. Generations from now, we will have stacks of parochial reports to peruse through. We will be able to access records that tell us how many people attended church, who married who, and the dates of baptisms of their ancestors. We can find out when folks died, and we will know the start dates and closing dates of many of our churches. That is history. Equally important are the stories of the people in the pews. We want to understand the human experience, and for that to happen, we need to know what brought them to those specific places, what kept them there, and what keeps them hopeful. A year and a half ago, I approached the dean and president of Virginia Theological Seminary to financially assist me in getting this project off the ground. It includes videos, which you'll see soon, and these banners that you see before you tonight. Now, interestingly, he was in Durham on a fundraising mission for the seminary. And as we chatted at his reception, I explained what I wanted to do. And shortly thereafter, the diocese was given a gift of $10,000 by Dean Ian Markham to complete this project. We look forward to rolling out the entire finished video at the Absalom Jones Service and Luncheon in February 2024. Tonight, you will hear from two of our participants. You will hear from Mr. Bruce Jenkins, Senior Warden of Chapel of Christ the King in Charlotte, and Mrs. Valeria Dove, Parish Administrator and ECW Executive Board Member of St. Stephen's in Winston-Salem. Each of them has a story to tell, and we are thrilled to offer them to you. And then following those videos, we will have a conversation.
It was, I'm surprised I still remember, because it was a long time ago. The priest that had came in, they had gotten a new priest at St. Stephen's apparently, and he moved down the street from me, 3 houses down from where I lived, on the street I lived on Cameron Avenue. And at the time, he realized his daughter's my daughter, and me, we all became friends. And as a matter of fact, his middle daughter and I are still we're like best friends, even though she lives in Michigan and I live here. He said, well, come on, go to church with me. So I did. And I was only 6 years old. And I have been a member of St. Stephen's since then.
Yeah, I think the service itself was really down to earth. And it just kind of spoke to me. So the service was just a come as you are service. You know, I didn't have to pretend to be anybody else but myself. And that's what I enjoyed about, attending the service. And of course, the congregation, there were just members here that were very welcoming and inspirational.
To me, it was interesting because I had been accustomed to going to church with my grandmother at a Baptist church. She sang on the choir, and choir was nice and neat. I loved music and everything, and I got sent to church school, to Sunday school, and then when I got a little bit older, she drugged me, even though I was still going to St. Stephen's, she took me to BTU. So I had to go to a lot of, I was going between the two churches for a while there. But I enjoyed the Episcopal service, the actual format of it. It was simple and it was easy, and I loved it. I couldn't be an acolyte, because girls couldn't be an acolyte then. And my godmother at the church, after I was confirmed in it and everything, and actually I was rebaptized and confirmed at the Episcopal church, and she said, well, you can sing on the choir with me. And so I was like, oh, I was happy. I got to sing in the choir, put this little beanie cap and stuff on, because back then you had to have your head covered as a woman. And it was interesting, and I loved it, and I've stuck with it. But I did learn that over the years, that even as a child, you be careful what you ask God for and pray for, because I used to follow behind her when she would take care of the altar and do all of this stuff, and I go, I want to do that. You don't ask for those things. You might get them. As far as I can, I don't remember now how long it is, and Elnora probably will remember, but I've been an altar guild chair for quite a while. Even before this stint and before that stint with a couple of other priests, I was in that duty. So it's been a while. I enjoy it though. It's something that I really get a lot of enjoyment out of. So I've been there for a while.
So, aside from the service itself, there was an after-school program going on, and I became aware of that and probably stopped in occasionally, and there were 30 to 40 young people here getting their homework done. They were getting fed meals after school, and at the time the neighborhood was let's say more fragile than it is now, and some of the kids were coming from some difficult households, home, and this was like a safe haven for these kids. And there were some tremendous volunteers from throughout the, from different churches in the area. And one guy that I'd like to mention, his name was Jack Fields. Jack is, no longer with us. He was I think he might have been a captain, but he was a former POW of Vietnam. And Jack was great with math, and he loved the kids. And it was people like Jack and others whose names I don't recall that volunteered on a daily basis and made sure these kids got their homework done, their grades improved, they got meals. It was just a great place to put my energy, my time, and my talent to promote that sort of activity. There was a ministry back in the 90s that was spearheaded by a young lady named Betsy Bilger. And she worked at the Light Factory, which was a photography studio learning center in Charlotte. And she applied and got a grant to bring cameras and teach these kids photography. They're priceless. I mean, you see the smiles on these kids' faces.
And one of the things that the member just talked about earlier was when we feed the homeless. That is a big outreach, but then again, that's an ECW function. And it's a great feeling to do that, because to see these ladies and to see how they react when we get a chance, we'll come to a table and sit with them and we'll eat and we'll talk to them. And they love that. They really do. And as she said, we do a meal that they don't usually get. Everybody else fixes all these casseroles and stuff. We do something different. So that to me is it's a reward and a challenge in a sense.
What is the meal that y'all are making?
Fried chicken, honey. Fried chicken and fried chicken, mac and cheese, and string beans, and hot rolls, and whatever kind of cake we put out, or cookies or whatever. It's not something they get all the time. I've seen some of them on the street and go, I know you're that lady that fed us the chicken. Can y'all come back again next year? This is in the middle of summer, and they're saying, can you come back when we go next year during the winter? I'm like, we'll try to. I'm like, wow. But people do remember the nice things that you do and the things that you do for them. So that's a big help. That is really a big help.
And one of the other ministries that I didn't mention is called the Sandwich Ministry. And a few folks get together, some old neighbors, some new neighbors, and some clergy, and they make 200 sandwiches in a day, on average, I think, maybe more than that. And they deliver them to Roof Above, which used to be Mecklenburg Ministries, and it's just like, folks are so glad to have a sandwich. I've been on that receiving end many years ago, and it's a wonderful thing. My grandmother lived to 102. She said we should, the Bible says, we should clothe the naked and feed the hungry, and that's what the church has been doing.
To me, one of the biggest challenges we've had over the years is losing membership, people leaving for one other reason or not, and not coming back. People leaving. Death has taken a lot of our members. Death took several of our members, not from COVID, but just from old age, as you say. Because as we've said before, our congregation is getting there. We're all senior citizens, most of us. We have a few younger ones there. My children, well, one of my children is still there. I have two daughters, and God, I think about it, guys, she's getting to be quite there herself. She'll be 40 in July. So it's kind of rough, but we've lost a lot of members, and I hate to see that happen for varied reasons. So we just have to try to keep, people coming.
I think the faith and the outreach ministries have been what has kept the chapel alive. Because money comes and goes, but we always seem to manage, even with very little and very few people. There weren't a lot of members. I think maybe 35 or so when I first came here, and then, an average service may have been 12. And then with COVID's coming, and since COVID, and because of COVID, we've lost probably 5 members that were really key members of the church. So we lost half the congregation, half of the active congregation. It's a lot of good people.
It's been said before, but a lot of dedicated people, members that love that church. Over the years, with us being 114 plus years, we've lost a lot of those people, and most of them are almost gone now. But we still have some few that are still dedicated, and we're trying our best to keep it going.
Well, I hope that there is still an Episcopal presence here, and I hope that services will return here, and the outreach is still going on. Maybe it's something in the soil that once you step on it, you want to do something. So, yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the future holds. Hopefully we'll get some younger people involved. I think there are some of our new neighbors that are in their 20s and 30s and 40s, which is young now to me, that are getting involved. So I think there's a lot of hot coals here, and keeping things going.
I'm hoping we can stay. I'm hoping we can keep the doors open. That's one of my biggest hopes. That a lot of changes need to happen for that to happen, but I feel that these things will happen. As I said earlier, even as a little girl, be careful what you pray for. So, you give it to God and you turn it over to Him, and you feel like it's going to happen. So I really think that through all of these years and a lot of people's prayers, sweat and tears, we brought it this far, that we're going to try to continue to bring it even further. We're hoping that people, Episcopalians that live in the city and the schools that are around, we can entice more children that are Episcopalians, that may be coming from an Episcopalian family, to come into the church. And I think that would be a big help. But even sometimes those doors are kind of blocked in a way. No matter what we try to do or how we try to do it, things seem to just get kind of closed up and shut. And you just take it from there and have faith and trust that God's going to make it happen. And it eventually will. It eventually will.
So there was a secret society here within the congregation called the B group. And that meant that we were going to be here after that priest left, and after the next priest left. If you're in the B group, you're going to be here. And so that was something I think Ernie and Lewis and we just had kind of an inside joke because in the 30 years I've been here, Will Henson was here, Michael Bai was here, Mother Angela was here, Father Shannon was here, Father Reggie is here. We had 2 or 3 interim priests. So there's been a lot of turnover, so to speak, in 30 years anyway. So, the B group was always the core that, we'll start a search committee, we'll look for the next priest, or, we'll do morning prayer until such time as we have a priest. The lay leadership is really the gasoline that keeps this engine going, I think. We do have priests and clergy, but there's the B group that's going to be here when they're gone. So Yeah, I consider myself a member of the B group, and glad to be here.
I hope you enjoyed those stories provided by Valeria Dove, who I believe is here tonight. I don't know if she's in the hall at the moment. Valeria, you can just raise your hand. And Bruce Jenkins, who could not be with us tonight. But both of them, as you heard on the video, come out of a rich Episcopal tradition, and their greatest hope is that their churches will be around for generations yet to come. In spite of amazing losses, they continue to be hopeful. And in Paul's first letter to the Thessalonians, he said, "Brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope." Indeed, we are called to be a hopeful people, and many continue to strive for such a goal in the midst of pandemics and old age, as Valeria called them. We continue to fight against the tide, for giving up and giving in never seems to be an option. So now we're going to talk to two clergy persons, and they're going to tell us about what they're hopeful for in just a moment. And they can speak in different ways and yet with a common thread. So I would like to welcome this evening the Reverends Reggie Payne Wayne, Vicar of Chapel of Christ the King, and Mother Michelle Roach, the new rector of the Church of the Redeemer in Greensboro. On the end there we have Hershey Millette Stevens, Reverend Hershey Millette Stevens. I don't want to ignore her. She's just not going to be in this conversation at this moment. So let me start with you, Father Reggie. You've been the vicar of Chapel of Christ the King in Charlotte for a number of years. You thank God for your B group who've kept going until you got there. So right now, I'd like you to just tell us a little bit about the chapel, give us a little context for it, and then if you would, share with us the story of the chapel for the last 3 to 4 years.
When I got there, I arrived as the supply clergy while I was the head chaplain at Trinity Episcopal School. So it was my weekend gig, and I went, I did the service. I hung out with them after the service for an hour, 2 hours, just talking to them, and I went away. I remember after the first Sunday when I did the service and I hung out with them in the parish hall, they said, "You're the first supply clergy who has done that. The rest of them just come and do the service and leave." You know, and granted, that's what we're paid to do, right? I mean, that's what we're supposed to kind of do, is do the service and leave. But I really enjoyed this group, so I hung out and I talked with them, and that's when I began to fall in love with that congregation, and decided that after 2 years at Trinity that it was time for me to transition and try to be their vicar, their part-time vicar. And so we made that transition 5 years ago, and I've been there ever since. Prior to me getting there as their supply clergy, they had been without clergy for 4 or 5 years, and they could only afford to bring in supply clergy twice a month, and the other 2 Sundays they would do morning prayer. And so that was the situation I was introduced into when I was supplying for them. I would supply for them twice a month, and then they would do morning prayer the other times. And I didn't even know, for the first 4 or 5 years I was in Charlotte, I didn't even know this church existed. The way I found out about it, I was supplying for another church, and a clergy person said, "Well, you know, there's Chapel of Christ the King. They don't have clergy." And I said, "Well, why don't you ever supply there?" He goes, "Oh, they don't have music. I'm not going to ever do that." And so I said, I'll go over there, and went over there and found an incredible, loving congregation that was everything that Bruce described. And so when I got there, I found a group of B people, as Bruce called them, who were tired, who were energetic still about the ministry that they had been doing, but they were tired. They were getting older. They didn't have the ability to do the things that they really wanted to do anymore. And they were looking for young people to come in and do that, and they weren't around to do it. And so they just kept doing it. one of the most remarkable things, to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, I had a parishioner who had stage 4 cancer. Nobody knew but his family and I and me. And so he was at church more than I was. He was the person who led morning prayer on the Sundays that I wasn't there. He was the altar guild person. He was the acolyte. He was the person in the garden on Saturdays who worked harder than any other person in the garden. And I just wanted to follow behind him and just kind of get him to slow down a little bit, you know. And his son would come and watch him in the garden and work beside him to make sure he was okay. But nobody knew. Nobody knew that he was sick. And he was there more than anybody else. And he worked up until the day he passed. And he was just that kind of guy. You know, I called him a shark. You know, he has to keep moving or else he doesn't know what to do. And he was remarkable. And you heard Bruce talk about, you know, we had anywhere from 12 to 15 parishioners who had come to the church, and he mentioned that 5 had died. Well, I have an update for you. More than that have died. And one of those included Bruce's brother. Another included the wife of our treasurer and the wife of a vestry member. And when I look back at those 12 members, 11 of those 12 members, or 14 of the 15 as I counted it, 14 of the 15 members had lost somebody in the last 2 years. And by somebody, I mean a wife, a husband, somebody very close to them. In addition to that, none of those losses were able to be celebrated in their worship space because of COVID and because of the condition of our building. And so the grieving was deep, and the grieving was not able to be processed in the way they were used to processing it because we couldn't say goodbye and celebrate the life of those folks in the chapel. And so we are working on several things at the chapel right now. We're working on how do we help this community grieve. And, you know, one of the ideas that we had, and we still have this idea, to have a liturgical service that helps them to grieve. But what we discovered is they're not quite ready for that yet. That what we have to do right now is, we being Rebecca, my deacon, and I, we have to do individual pastoral care with each person, getting them ready to be able to come together in a liturgical setting to grieve. The other thing that we're doing is we're doing social nights, you know, men night and women's night, where we just go out and just hang out together. And I believe that out of those hanging out times will come organically an idea for how to liturgically mark the passing of those folks who have gone on and mark the grieving of our church, of even when we go back into our space, it's not going to be the same space. Ernie's wife, Chris, who used to sit on the front row with him and lead us in music, will not be there. Ernie said he won't be there because he can't imagine being in that pew without her. It's going to be a different space. So that's part of the challenge of our community right now is to figure out how to deal with that grief and how to process everyone through it. But even in the midst of that, the outreach and the community is still at the front of their mind. We still have a community garden where they come out and they work in the garden. We still have a tax relief fund where several of them serve on that board, where we help people in the community to pay off their taxes. We have $1 million houses sitting right next door to a Habitat house that's 50 years old. So you can imagine what that's done to their taxes. And so one of the things we've done is we raise money and we help people pay off their taxes. We give them $1,000 towards their taxes every year. We have people doing that. We were doing community meals up until COVID, and now we're trying to figure out how to get back into that that was another thing that we love to do. We do make the sandwiches every other week for Roof Above. So those are the things that we're doing even in the midst of that grief. And that's something that we've continued to do. And I think it's one of the things that really holds this group together is their love for the community, even in the midst of all of that grief.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that. That's amazing. Mother Michelle, you just arrived into to Greensboro, but I know that the parishioners were waiting on you with bated breath to get there. They've been waiting quite a while. Probably about 4.5 years, they went without clergy. They did a great job of keeping supply priests and all of that. But so your journey is different, but still, I know a lot of them have been wanting to tell their stories to you. So what has the journey been like for that group of people for the last 4.5 years or so?
Thank you, Reverend Kathy. I have to be honest with you, until I received the call, I had never heard of Greensboro. And I've started there August the 1st. So I do have some information, and I get information every single day. So I will tell what I know. And I want to start off with me walking into the sanctuary at Redeemer one summer evening. And with the dim light of the day, I sat heavily onto one of the pews. Why that heavy movement to the seat? Something hit me in that sanctuary. And I said, "Is this it, Lord? Is this the place for me?" Why so many emotions rushed at me all at one time? And then I realized I was home. I was talking with the senior warden weeks later. He told me of how Redeemer became his home some 40+ years earlier. He visited the church, and in the lounge off the parish hall, he noticed a picture of the then Archbishop from his country on the wall of the lounge. He called his grandmother later to tell her what he saw on his visit. His grandmother said, "Well, I guess you have found your church." Redeemer has maintained being a church home for many who have come and stayed for more than 50+ years. They have traversed the mountains and valleys of church life. One of these valleys was as recent as 4.5 years ago, when the rector left, and then the pandemic shutdown followed close behind. There was no rector, no fellowship, no gathering, in order for them to lean on each other. But rather than say, "Poor me," 2 of the members, along with other members, stepped boldly and faithfully forward and did something about it. At first, they came together via conference calling and then Zoom until they were able to re-enter the sanctuary again. Once open, Redeemer came together each Sunday for morning prayer, and then with the help of a steady flow of supply priests, they returned to the Episcopal form of worship. For about 3 years, these supply priests made themselves available to answer questions and concerns and offer reassurance to the members. Redeemer has shown itself to be resilient, being able to run with the tide, to respond to whatever is being thrown at it. And they've had a number of big items to address during this time. They made significant decisions together, including 2 major capital campaigns, one for an HVAC system and the other for a new organ. They continue to serve their community by feeding the hungry through food collection ministry for Urban Ministries Greensboro, collecting as many as 1,000 pounds of food each week. Additionally, while the clergy dealt with funeral services, the members continued their pastoral visits to the sick and shut-ins on a weekly basis and cared for themselves during the loss of church members. When I asked what contributed to this resilience, I was told it was their faith that God's got this. And because of their faith, they were able to think outside of the box to come up with creative and innovative ways to achieve the goal of sustainability. They are determined and persistent in wanting their church to maintain its presence in the community and the diocese, and to remain a beacon to all who come through its doors. And so this is the church I was handed. And now, while Redeemer thrives and thrives well, the journey of the past 4.5 years have left them tired and ready to hand over the reins to me. However, I am not doing so by myself. Many members are still in place, but they're hoping with a new rector in place to improve and build on what they have started. Here is where I do believe God is leading Redeemer. Number one, we want to improve the current technology in hope of increasing its media presence online through a new website and live streaming. This will enable shut-ins and our members or anyone to view services at the time of worship or at a later date. To explore additional ways to outreach to the community through its presence at the table for affordable housing and gun violence issues as they are addressed. To begin a feasibility study on the condition of the physical buildings with special attention to the bathrooms. Revitalize the youth program, which has already begun. Though small, it has begun. Build relationships with A&T University and Bennett College. As we minister to the spiritual needs of the students, we are hoping to engage them with internships of structuring the technological needs of the church and aid us with live streaming services, and on and on and on. To achieve these lofty goals will call for capital campaigns for member involvement and hopefully contributions from the diocese. Some of these goals can be achieved within the next year, and some will need to be completed within the next 5 years. We see Redeemer regaining its prominent position of the past as it embraces a different future post-pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have a lot of time left for this conversation, but I want to ask the two of you. Obviously, Michelle, you are in your honeymoon period. You've just gotten here, but you've got a long list of things to do. What makes you hopeful about the people that you've encountered in your community? And so as you prepare the next 5 years, what gives you hope that you all can achieve these goals?
They want to achieve the goals as well. You know, they want to see Redeemer do well, to grow with the young. That's what every church wants. They want the young people, they want to see the families, they want to see members in the church. They want to see the ministries that we used to have, they had years ago. All of them will not come back, but some of them, you know, we will be able to have in place as we go on from time to time. But the members have a passion and an emotional attachment to Redeemer. And that, with the help of God, remember what we said in baptism, I will with God's help, and they have got it.
Thank you. And so, Father Reggie, I have the same question for you. You've got a you've got a big project that's sort of on the board, right, as it were. So what are you hopeful for in the next 3 to 5 years?
My briefest answer would be Bruce.
The B guy.
Yeah, the B guy. And the other 4 or 5 like him. They have been there, they have been doing it. They are determined to continue to do it, whether I'm there or not. And they give me hope because they have seen much leaner times than I've seen, and they're still there. And so that gives me hope that because as lean as the times are now, They are nowhere as lean as they were for them for many, many years when the diocese wasn't paying attention and not engaged and in the work of redeveloping that church. And they were still there. They're still here. So the fact that they're still here and they're going to be here is my biggest hope.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Please give a round of applause to our two conversationalists. Thank you. Thank you, friends. Now we're going to have a little bit of fun, and I'm going to invite the Reverend Hershey Millette Stevens to come up to the dais, and she will lead you all into a bit of your own story sharing. Or you can sit here, whichever. It's free and easy tonight.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I love that you said you invited me for fun, Kathy. All right, we're gonna have fun. One, I love stories. I love stories so much that I wrote a guidebook on sharing stories. You can find it, shameless plug, on the Episcopal Church's website, story sharing, if you just search that. But I fell in love with stories as a young girl. When I was little, I used to put my animals in a circle, you know, my stuffed animals and my dolls, California raisin, child of the 80s, you know, and my, y'all remember those like bears, Care Bears? My California raisins and my Care Bears, you know, kid sister. We would sit in a circle with my siblings and we would play a game called Hi Bob, Thanks for Sharing Bob. So basically, in this game, it was a really fun game, and you guys are gonna play it in a little bit. You stand up and you say, hi, my name is Bob, and I have a problem. And then you start to tell the story of your problem. Well, we have been going to NA meetings, so we learned to play Hi Bob, Thanks for Sharing Bob there. My mother walked in on us playing Hi Bob, Thanks for Sharing Bob, and we stopped going to NA meetings. But we stopped going to NA meetings, but we didn't stop loving stories. And I think what I learned in those rooms is what many people learn in the rooms, is that stories transform your life. Stories are where resurrection happens. We know that, right? We resurrect Jesus every time we tell the story, every time we're at the altar, every time we read the gospel in the center of our worship space. We are participating in resurrection. And for me, playing Hi Bob, Thanks for Sharing Bob, like I was like 7. I couldn't articulate that, but I knew that something special happens when you put words to your experience. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to put some words to our experience. And you may be thinking, I don't need to tell my story. I know my story. I live my story. You do. So just get over that part. I only got 5 minutes, so I have to be a little rushed with you. Some days I do this presentation, takes, you know, we do 4 hours. So I got 5 minutes, so I got to get you guys there. Get over it. You're going to tell your story. And so this is your end to storytelling. I'm currently serving as the chaplain at St. Augustine's University, and the Chapel of St. Augustine's was built in 1895. It is beautiful. One of the hidden gems of North Carolina. Best church ever. Not because I'm there, but because the stones of this chapel were quarried from the land on which it sits. And the students quarried the stones. I tell this, you know, little story about how the chapel was built at every orientation. And I say at every orientation, I wouldn't trust y'all to build a doghouse. And that's true. I wouldn't trust my students right now to build a doghouse. But the chaplain and the students built the chapel at St. Augustine's University. And it's still standing. It is still standing. And our roof ain't leaking. You know, it's good. But when you look around the room, you see the imperfections of the building. I mean, they were learning how to do something. They were learning the craft of masonry. And so each wall is different, a different technique. You know, some of the stones jut out a little bit. It's not perfect, it's wobbly, but it's still standing. And so I thought tonight that we would tell a story about something that we have built or something that we made. Because we're all in the business of making and building things, you know. But before we do that, I gotta tell you the rules of a story, right? A story needs what? Yes, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Y'all are so smart. All right, so a story has to have a beginning, middle, and end. And we have about 5 minutes for storytelling. And you're gonna have a partner. And you're gonna tell your partner about a time you built something. So it could be, you know, like you built a doghouse maybe, or it could be something you made, right? And it could be something you're proud of. But before we go into our 5 minutes of storytelling, I just want you to close your eyes and kind of transport yourself back to the time you built, made, or drew something. You know, I'm getting really expansive now. Where were you? What were you doing? Did you think that you could build this thing? Did you have every confidence that the way I'm starting is going to yield the result that I want? Do you remember what you smelled? Do you remember what noises or what the environment was like? Try to transport yourself back and feel the feelings you were feeling at the time you were building or at the time you completed, or in many cases, when I bake things, at the time you were defeated. So just take a few minutes to do that. Okay, so have you transported yourself back in time? All right. Now, I'm gonna set a timer. So get a partner, and you're gonna have 2 minutes to tell the story. That's why we did the brainstorming, so you could just go right on in. 2 minutes, setting a timer. So the rules of storytelling is your story has to have a beginning, middle, and end. The rules of listening while someone's telling the story is you can't ask any questions. You have to let it come to you. And you have to keep an open mind, okay? All right, let me get my timer going. Don't start talking yet. All right, ready, share. This is your 15-second warning.
Oh, wow.
All right, wrap those stories up. Don't blame me, blame Kathy. She said 5 minutes. Oh, we'll do another one. Okay. All right, now switch. The other person who is listening now tells the story. All right, 15 seconds, storytellers. All right, friends. Have you told the story? Okay, I get a thumbs up in the back. All right, you've told a story. Have you heard a story? All right. So we've told a story and we've heard a story. And the thing that I love about stories, you know, once you tell them, they are not yours anymore. And so what we need to do now is a little bit of deciding. So if you have shared a story with someone and you heard a story and then you shared a story and heard a story, or whatever way you did it, now it's time to talk to the person across from you and say, you know, do you mind, like you could ask some questions if you want. We'll give a little time for that, because I don't know about you all, but my story partner was really interesting. And then you all can decide, how do you want that person to care for your story? Is that story just for this moment, just for this room? Or are you going to give them that story, you know, not that they'll like go out on Cherry Street and tell everyone that they meet about what you just told them. But if you don't want them to share the story, you can say that, you know, I don't want you to share my story. And I hope that we can honor that in this place today. So you get 2 more minutes to kind of ask a follow-up question if you have follow-up questions. Or you can just spend the 2 minutes thanking the person, but also just decide how you want the other person to care for your story in the next 2 minutes. Really, 2 minutes. Okay. All right, friends, thank you so much for sharing your stories. I love the energy, the smiling, and the laughter that I'm hearing. Okay, so now Kathy wants me to give it back to her. Now back to business. You've had your fun.
I love a person who can follow a clock. Thank you. I said we may have started late, but we've got to get out of here on time. So I hope that you all enjoyed telling your stories. I really do. And I hope that this has been a fun and enjoyable evening for everyone tonight. And at this time, I'm going to ask everyone to please stand. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Most gracious and ever-living God, we are so grateful for all of the stories in this room, all of the stories that were told tonight, the ones that we will hold dear, and the ones that we will allow to go out further into the world. As we prepare to depart this place for the night, we also pray fervently for peace in all the places around the world where there is conflict. We especially ask for your intercession in the Middle East and in Ukraine. We pray for those who have not yet arrived tonight, and we hope that they are traveling safely and that this convention will be a time of reconnection, recollection, and renewal. We thank you, Lord, for the amazing ways in which you have shown your presence to parishioners all over this diocese for so long. And we are especially grateful for the ways in which you demonstrate your love for our Black congregations who keep climbing and moving in spite of the many adversities and inequities that they have known. We thank you for the guardian angels you have placed on their path. And now, Lord, as we leave this sacred space, may we all have a night of rest and relaxation and awaken tomorrow prepared to do the work you have given us to do. We ask all these things in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Let us bless the Lord.